Most women completely miss the most powerful moment in intimacy. It's not during foreplay. It's not during the act itself. It's those 5 seconds right before he enters you, when his body is primed, when anticipation is at its peak, and when what you do next will either create forgettable sex or the kind of desire that makes him crave you for the rest of his life. At 68, Margaret discovered this accidentally. Right before Robert was about to enter her, she paused, placed her hand on his chest, looked him in the eyes, and said, "I choose you. Right now, there's nowhere else I want to be." Robert's entire body trembled. Later, he told her he'd never felt more desired in his entire life, and he couldn't stop thinking about that moment for weeks. That pause, that eye contact, those words activated something in his brain that pure physical stimulation never could. And once you understand what's really happening in a man's mind and body in those crucial seconds before penetration, you'll never approach intimacy the same way again. Subscribe right now because we're about to have the honest conversation about mature sexuality that nobody else is willing to have. This isn't about tricks or gymnastics. This is about the psychology and physiology of male desire after 60 and the 7 specific things you can do right before he enters you that will make him tremble with wanting you forever. The first thing you need to understand is that for men over 60, psychological arousal has become more important than visual stimulation. When men are younger, visual cues dominate. A man in his 20s or 30s can be aroused almost purely by what he sees. But as men age, their arousal patterns shift. What happens in his mind, what he feels emotionally and psychologically in the moment, becomes the primary driver of his physical response. And this shift actually works powerfully in your favor once you understand how to activate it. Dr. Barry McCarthy, a sex therapist who specializes in mature sexuality, explains that men over 60 experience what he calls emotionally integrated arousal. Their physical response is deeply connected to feeling wanted, valued, and chosen. The psychological component isn't just an addition to physical arousal, it's become the foundation of it. So right before he enters you, what you do to activate his psychological arousal will determine how intensely he experiences the entire encounter. And the most powerful trigger? Making him feel deliberately chosen in that specific moment. Linda was 65 when she discovered this with Thomas. They'd been intimate several times, and while the physical connection was pleasant, she sensed something was missing. Then one night, right before they were about to make love, she did something different. She took his face in both hands, looked directly at him, and said slowly, "I've been thinking about this all day. About you. About this moment. I wanted you hours ago, and I've been waiting." The effect was immediate and visceral. Thomas's breathing changed. His pupils dilated. His entire body seemed to focus with an intensity that hadn't been there moments before. Later, he confessed that hearing her voice her desire so specifically, so deliberately, made him feel more masculine and wanted than he had in years. It wasn't just that she was willing. It was that she actively, consciously wanted him, and she was willing to say it out loud in that vulnerable moment. Research from the Kinsey Institute confirms that men over 60 rank feeling desired by their partner as more important to sexual satisfaction than frequency, duration, or any specific physical act. When you make him feel chosen right before intimacy begins, you're activating the deepest level of his arousal system. So the first thing to do right before he enters you is simple. Make deliberate eye contact and tell him, in whatever words feel authentic to you, that you want this. Not that you're willing, not that you're ready, but that you actively desire him in this moment. I want you inside me, or I've been wanting this, or I need you right now. The specific words matter less than the genuine communication of active desire. His body will respond in ways that surprise both of you, because you've just activated something deeper than physical arousal. You've activated his psychological need to be wanted, and that creates a trembling, urgent desire that pure physical stimulation alone cannot achieve. The second thing that creates powerful desire in that crucial moment is strategic pause combined with deliberate touch. Most intimate encounters follow a fairly predictable progression. Foreplay builds, arousal increases, and there's a natural momentum toward penetration. But when you introduce a deliberate pause right at the moment of highest anticipation, combined with specific touch, you create a spike in arousal that most men haven't experienced since they were much younger. Dr. Ian Kerner, sex therapist and author, talks about the power of what he calls edging, but not in the way most people understand it. He's not talking about prolonged sessions or complicated techniques. He's talking about brief, strategic pauses that allow anticipation to build to almost unbearable levels before satisfaction. Right before he enters you, when his body is primed and waiting, pause. Place your hand on him, not moving, just holding him with deliberate pressure and warmth. Let him feel your touch, your heat, your proximity, but don't allow movement yet. Hold him there for 5, 10, 15 seconds while you maintain that eye contact we talked about earlier. Let the anticipation build until you can feel his body trembling with the need to continue. Carol was 67 when she tried this with Kenneth. They'd reached the point where he was positioned to enter her, and instead of allowing the natural progression, she wrapped her hand around him, held him still, and just looked at him while she felt his pulse against her palm. She could feel his body straining, trembling with wanting to move forward, but she held him there, letting the anticipation build until she could see it in his eyes, in his breathing, in the tension throughout his entire body. When she finally guided him inside her, Kenneth's response was so intense that he later told her he'd never experienced anything quite like it. The combination of psychological arousal from feeling desired and the physical intensity of that prolonged anticipation created a level of pleasure that felt almost overwhelming. And more importantly, it created a sense memory that his body couldn't forget. Every time they approached intimacy after that, his body remembered that moment of trembling anticipation, and his desire for her intensified. The pause doesn't need to be long. 10 to 15 seconds is often enough. But in that pause, you're accomplishing several things simultaneously. You're demonstrating control and confidence, which men find incredibly arousing. You're allowing his arousal to peak beyond its normal level. And you're creating a distinct, memorable moment that stands out from every other intimate experience he's had. Dorothy tried a variation of this with Michael. Right before penetration, she'd run her hands slowly down his chest, his stomach, taking her time, making him wait while she touched him deliberately. She'd whisper, "Not yet. I want to feel you trembling first." And she'd watch his body respond, muscles tensing, breathing accelerating, until she could literally feel him shaking with need. Only then would she pull him inside her. Michael told her months later that he'd think about those moments during his day, that the memory of that trembling anticipation would hit him at random times, and he'd find himself craving her with an intensity that felt almost adolescent. She'd created a Pavlovian response in his body, the anticipation of that pause, of her deliberate touch, of being made to wait right at the moment of highest desire, became so powerfully associated with pleasure that his body would begin responding just thinking about it. Third, give him verbal confirmation of his effect on you. Men over 60 carry anxiety about their bodies and performance. Right before penetration, specific verbal acknowledgement eliminates that anxiety and allows his arousal to reach full potential. Don't give generic praise. Give specific observations. You're so hard right now. Or, I can feel you throbbing. You really want this. Or, your body is trembling. I love that I do this to you. Helen was 66 when she started this with Richard. Right before penetration, she'd run her hand along him and say, "You're so ready for me." Simple, but it confirmed his body was responding perfectly, that his arousal was visible and affecting her. The effect was cumulative. Each time Helen provided specific acknowledgement, Richard's confidence increased. Within months, he was experiencing desire and physical response he hadn't felt in years, not because his body had changed, but because his psychological state had transformed. Ruth took this further with James. Right before he entered her, she'd guide his hand to feel her own arousal. "Feel what you do to me. Feel how wet I am. This is what you create." She showed him concrete evidence of his effect, eliminating any doubt about whether she was genuinely aroused or just participating. James told her those moments of tangible proof eliminated the voice in his head that whispered doubts. With those doubts gone, his arousal became more intense and focused. Fourth, create a sensory signature uniquely associated with you. Introduce a specific sensation he experiences only with you in those moments before penetration. A specific scent, a specific touch, a specific word. His body learns to associate this stimulus with intense pleasure, and eventually, that stimulus alone triggers arousal. Patricia was 64 when she discovered this accidentally. She wore a specific perfume only before intimate evenings with David. After months, David mentioned catching that scent in a store and his body immediately responding with arousal, instantly thinking about being inside her. Patricia had created classical conditioning. David's body associated that scent with sexual pleasure with her, and now the scent alone triggered desire. She became deliberate about it, applying that perfume right before sex. The association strengthened until that scent functioned like a physical trigger. Barbara used touch with Martin. Right before he entered her, she'd always run her fingernails down his back in a specific pattern, every single time, same moment. Within weeks, Martin's body responded to that touch automatically. Barbara could use it anywhere, kitchen, hallway, and his body would immediately respond with arousal. She'd created a sensory trigger that bypassed his conscious mind and spoke directly to his nervous system. Susan created her signature through words. Right before penetration, she'd whisper, "I'm ready for you now." Same phrase, same tone, every time. Eventually, Susan could whisper those words in non-intimate settings and watch David's body immediately respond. Fifth, grant explicit permission that demonstrates your desire. Right before penetration, create a moment where he waits for your explicit go-ahead, but grant that permission in a way that shows you're not gatekeeping, you're eagerly choosing. Linda was 65 when she discovered this accidentally. She wore a specific perfume only before intimate evenings with David. After months, David mentioned catching that scent in a store and his body immediately responding with arousal, instantly thinking about being inside her. Patricia had created classical conditioning. David's body associated that scent with sexual pleasure with her, and now the scent alone triggered desire. She became deliberate about it, applying that perfume right before sex. The association strengthened until that scent functioned like a physical trigger. Barbara used touch with Martin. Right before he entered her, she'd always run her fingernails down his back in a specific pattern, every single time, same moment. Within weeks, Martin's body responded to that touch automatically.
Barbara could use it anywhere, kitchen, hallway, and his body would immediately respond with arousal. She'd created a sensory trigger that bypassed his conscious mind and spoke directly to his nervous system. Susan created her signature through words. Right before penetration, she'd whisper, "I'm ready for you now." Same phrase, same tone, every time. Eventually, Susan could whisper those words in non-intimate settings and watch David's body immediately respond.
Sixth, demonstrate your own pleasure visibly and undeniably. Men over 60 want confirmation they're genuinely pleasuring you, not just being accommodated. Right before penetration, demonstrate your arousal unmistakably. You eliminate his performance anxiety and replace it with confidence. Carol was 67 when she realized Kenneth was uncertain about whether she was truly aroused. She started being deliberate. Right before he'd enter her, she'd guide his hand to touch her, to feel the evidence. She'd make sounds. She'd let her body respond visibly. Breathing would change, muscles would tense, hips would tilt toward him. Kenneth told her that seeing and feeling her genuine arousal transformed intimacy. He wasn't worried about doing things right. The evidence was undeniable, allowing him to relax into his own pleasure while being turned on by hers. Helen took this further with Richard. Right before penetration, she'd touch herself while he watched, let him see her pleasure building. Then she'd pull him to her urgently. "Now, I need you now." Richard described those moments as some of the most arousing of his life. Watching her visible pleasure, knowing it was genuine, then being pulled into it, created confidence and desire he'd rarely experienced. He wasn't wondering if he was enough. The answer was obvious. Seventh, create complete presence where all distractions disappear. Even during sex, minds wander. Right before penetration, create a moment that captures his complete attention and pulls him entirely into the present. His arousal intensifies dramatically because all focus concentrates on the pleasure he's experiencing. Patricia was 64 when she started this with David. Right before he'd enter her, she'd frame his face with both hands, look into his eyes, and hold that gaze. No words, just sustained eye contact that demanded complete presence. She wouldn't look away until she could see he was fully there, mind stopped wandering, attention completely focused. David described it as almost overwhelming. That eye contact in such a vulnerable moment stripped away every distraction, every anxious thought. He became completely present, and his arousal in those moments was more intense than he'd ever felt. Barbara used a different approach with Martin. Right before he entered her, she'd breathe deeply and say softly, "Be here with me. Right now. Just this." Martin would breathe with her, and she could feel when his attention shifted fully into the present, when everything else fell away. Martin told her those moments changed how he experienced not just intimacy, but his entire life. The intensity of pleasure when truly present versus when his mind was elsewhere was incomparable.
Here's what all of these elements share. They're about creating psychological and emotional intensity right at the moment when his body is primed for physical intensity. You're layering psychological arousal on top of physical arousal. And the combination creates a response that he cannot forget and will crave repeatedly. Margaret, Linda, Carol, Dorothy, Helen, Ruth, Patricia, Barbara, Susan, all of these women discovered that the key to creating lasting, trembling desire in their partners wasn't about their bodies looking a certain way or performing complicated techniques. It was about understanding male psychology, about activating the emotional and psychological triggers that drive arousal in mature men, and about having the confidence to deliberately create intense moments rather than just letting intimacy happen passively. You don't need to do all 7 of these things. Even incorporating one or two will create a noticeable shift in how intensely he responds to you. The key is deliberateness. Stop rushing past that crucial moment right before penetration. Recognize it as the moment of maximum psychological opportunity. Use it intentionally to create desire that goes beyond physical stimulation and reaches into his psyche, his memory, his fundamental sense of being wanted and chosen. When you make him feel deliberately desired, when you create strategic anticipation, when you provide specific verbal acknowledgement, when you establish sensory signatures, when you create moments of explicit choice, when you demonstrate your own undeniable pleasure, when you demand complete presence, you're not just improving one intimate encounter, you're creating imprints that his body and mind will carry forward, that will make him crave you specifically in ways that surprise even him. At 60 and beyond, you have something that younger women often don't: the confidence to be deliberate, the life experience to understand psychology, and the freedom to prioritize genuine pleasure over performance. Use those advantages. Understand that creating lasting desire isn't about how you look or what positions you can achieve. It's about the psychological and emotional intensity you create in key moments. Right before he enters you is one of those key moments. Don't waste it by rushing past. Use it deliberately and watch him tremble with a desire that doesn't fade but grows stronger every time you're together. If this resonated with you, leave a comment below. Share which element you're going to try, or tell me about your own experiences. And share this video with women who need to hear that creating intense, lasting desire after 60 is absolutely possible when you understand the psychology behind it. You deserve passionate intimacy that fulfills you completely, and he deserves to feel desired in ways that make him tremble. When you understand what to do in those crucial moments right before intimacy, you create exactly that. I'll see you in the next video.